Set.
Okay.
Hello. Uh, this is Michael Forsyth on WQAT, the radio station of Allen Temple A.M.E, the downtown church in Greenville, South Carolina. This is an important election year with the control of the U.S. Senate in up for grabs. Today, we have with us Catherine Fleming Bruce, who is running for the Senate seat that's currently held by Republican Tim Scott. She's pursuing the Democratic Party nomination in the primary race coming up on June 14th. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Fleming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Let me begin by asking you, why did you decide to run for the U.S. Senate?
Well, I decided to run. I'd actually been thinking about it for a number of years, and mainly because I took note of many of Tim Scott's votes and positions. And looking at that and the impact that those votes have made me realize that he really needed to be opposed. And I went through the process of opening an exploratory committee to see if I had sufficient support for the race, and especially it being a statewide race. I did find that I had the support to step forward and made the decision to do so. And I made my announcement on Martin Luther King Day of this year.
Let me begin by asking you, why did you decide to run? What made you make that decision?
Well, I decided to run because, and again, I've been thinking about that for a number of years. I looked at Tim Scott's record and looked at his votes and the impact that his votes had on our state. And I knew that he needed to be opposed. So I made the decision to run after forming an exploratory committee to reach out to people around the state to see if they would support my race, and they did so. So I made the decision to run, and I announced in January of this year.
We'd like our listeners to get a chance to know you as a person. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your family background, where you grew up and so on?
Sure. I am what you call an Army brat. My dad was in the U.S. Army. So I was born in Kentucky on one of the military bases there. Some of my growing up time was in the Washington State area. We lived in Texas, Alaska, Washington State before my dad's retirement and return to Sumter, South Carolina. So that's where my formative years from that point took place. Elementary, middle, and high school, graduating from Sumter High. And during that time, my dad was one of the plaintiffs in a voting rights case that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And subsequently, he ran for a seat on Sumter County Council and became a councilman, and also eventually became chair of the council before he passed away. My mother is a teacher. She's still with us. And so between the two of them, I had a strong background, not only of Black history, but of civic engagement, being involved, volunteering, paying attention to the democratic process, and being involved in party politics. So I always had that engagement. I went to school in Georgia at Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia, came back and got my master's from the University of South Carolina, English, creative writing, and art. So I am an author. I have written a book on civil rights, historical sites around the country and how they were formed and how they're a continuation of civil rights action. So that book received a national award and has been a feature of national discussion since that time, since it was published and given the award in 2017. So I've been involved in entrepreneurial work, but I've also had a chance to work in state organizations. I worked with South Carolina ETV for a number of years. I worked with the State Humanities Council, a nonprofit that funds programming around humanities issues. And I've also been an advocate. So from that standpoint, I've been involved in a variety of groups ranging from Black Voters Matter to Indivisible, South Carolina Appleseed, and the Poor People's Campaign, which focus on advocacy and policy to aid low and moderate income people. Been a poll manager for a number of years, including an absentee poll manager. So I learned a lot about the election process. I've also had a couple of things I'm really proud of. I've been involved in international activity. I've written for international journals. I have participated in United Nations summits. I've studied regime change, international policy, and international organizations, which I think is a critical skill set right now with the Russian-Ukraine war. And I was also appointed to serve as the foreperson for a state grand jury investigation on public corruption. So I looked at our sitting legislators and their relationship with lobbyists and corporations in a way that was against the law. We handed down several indictments and we wrote a public report that focused on the negative impacts of dark money and engagement in these lobby corporate groups. So I've had an opportunity to be civically engaged in an effective and impactful way for a number of years around the state. So I have a number of contacts around the state that I've been able to work with. And I've also worked with a number of organizations, helping them to grow stronger and have more capacity for change. So that's a little bit about me. And I also have a son who is in the U.S. Air Force. So very proud of that as well.
Going into a little depth with some of these things, that experience investigating corruption, what did you learn from that and about government?
Well, I certainly became more aware of the law and, you know, that particular set of laws that governs legislators, their behavior, and what public corruption is. We learned about making sure that we have an unbiased legislature. What does it mean to have a legislature that is working on our behalf? So we often put our legislators in office and we aren't necessarily asking them for accountability or transparency the way we should. And so fortunately, we do have these agencies that make sure that the public is being defended. So that is important to know and to be a part of that process. But thanks to this relationship with lobbyists and corporations, you had laws passed like what happened with VC Summer. So if you're aware, of the VC summer in the Fairfield County area. That was a nuclear plant that actually ended up being a debacle because the money wasn't spent accordingly and had to be dismantled. And, there's still a lot of fallout from that, including Dominion Energy taking over, one of the power distributors here in the States. It was a major event. So our legislators are sent there to Columbia to work on behalf of the people. But if we don't have ethics laws, oversight, campaign finance reform, if we're not looking at who is investing in the campaigns, and that's kind of obscured by dark money, then people who we send there may not necessarily be working for us. People sent to Columbia or people sent to Washington. So we need to have a understanding of that. We need to have a commitment to anti-corrupt behavior. We need to have a commitment to working for the people's agenda and being responsible to the people and not having a kind of mightier than thou, holier than thou aspect to what we're doing. So that was a great that was a great lesson in being a part of that, because all kinds of people you see are bought into a system because they're going to get some benefit in some way. So a lot of people who should be speaking out are silent instead.
Yes. In addition to what you mentioned about your background, I understand you also have been an educator. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, I had the opportunity to teach at several institutions. The first one being Benedict College. So I taught there for a period of time in the journalism department. Also taught at Claflin in their journalism department for a couple of years before accepting another position and also moving on to doing some doctoral work. And also taught at Midlands Tech at several of their campuses. So all of that was work in writing, business writing, mass communications, journalism, or broadcasting. So those are my areas of expertise, and had an opportunity to do that.
Yes. You've done what you call democracy building
Yes.
through an organization called the National Coalition Delegation. Can you tell us about that organization?
Yes, that was actually an organization that I formed after being elected to be a representative for the Democratic Party of South Carolina to the National Democratic Convention. So, as you may know, there are delegates to the different presidential candidates. And I wanted to accomplish a couple of things with that organization. One, to connect us to one another, because many of us go there representing a specific candidate, and we may not engage each other too much beyond those candidates. So the candidates at the time in 2020 were now President Joe Biden, Senator Bernie Sanders, now Secretary Pete Buttigieg. So those were, examples of some of the presidential candidates who had delegates to the convention. So this would give us an opportunity to talk to one another and to work together. And we also wanted to make sure that the public was engaged in the platform building process. So one of the things that happens at the national convention is a platform, a national platform is approved. So we did a couple of things. One, we had a couple of Zoom programs where we talked to people about, hey, this is the platform. These are the things that are currently in the platform. If you have feedback, these are opportunities that you will have to let the delegates know what you want to see in the platform, therefore encouraging their participation. So we spent a number of episodes doing that and engaging people. And after that, after the president was elected, we hosted a different program on the day of or the day before the inauguration, talking to people about the president's agenda items and having different guest hosts on that show. So we had delegates from across the country who are part of that network, as well as delegates who live outside of the US, who are still US citizens, but they live in other countries. So we were all united in our effort to create a way for the public to be more engaged in the democratic process. So that's what I mean by democracy building. How do we contribute to making sure more people are involved and engaged, as well as informed?
That's incredible. You also were involved in disaster relief, and that resulted in you receiving the seal of the city of Columbia, Mississippi, which has a relationship with our own Columbia, South Carolina. Can you tell listeners that story and how it ended up affecting the relationship between the two cities?
Well, that was a really interesting story because it came from a relationship that I had with a classmate from Agnes Scott who lives in Columbia, Mississippi. And I live in Columbia, South Carolina. And I heard about a disaster that they had, a T4 or T5 tornado that they had right around Christmas. And they were doing, whatever they could to provide recovery. When I looked into that and I discovered that their city was named after our city, because some of the founding fathers had actually come from Columbia, traveled to that area and helped establish that city. I thought, wow, we have a natural network, a natural connection. So I went to the people of Columbia, South Carolina on television, asking them to support that effort, and put the ways for people to donate and all of that. So that went very well. The next year, Columbia, South Carolina had what we call our 1,000-year flood. And as you know, that impacted many other parts of the state as well. When the people of Columbia, Mississippi heard about what happened to us, they organized these fundraisers all over the city. They're much smaller than Columbia as well, but they organized this fantastic effort. Ended up with 2 or 3 long distance trucks full of water and supplies, raised several $1,000s that we ended up distributing to the hospitals, because some of them had been impacted and their patients and staff had been impacted. So they came up with the trucks and we had a wonderful time. They met the mayor. We did a ceremony. Their children made little stars for us. It was just a wonderful thing. So shortly afterward, I asked the city of Columbia to make them sister cities. So they, we produced a plaque, and I took that plaque down to Columbia, Mississippi, where, they had a ceremony for me, gave me the seal, and as well as a seal for the city of Columbia. Now, I didn't expect to get a seal. I was like, what? Wow. So I really, a seal and a key. So, there was one for the city that I got to take back and deliver to our city leaders, and one for me. So I was really honored and humbled by that. I think, and now we have a new mayor in our city. So we're able to look at, okay, we have this relationship. How can we build on that relationship from there? But just that the fact that we have a history that we now recognize, and then both of us helped each other during this crisis, gives us an opportunity. What more can we do? And how else can we continue to partner, not only with that city, but with other cities and communities around the state?
Yes. Well, you've had a wide variety of experiences serving in South Carolina, serving the people. How would you say your experiences have prepared you to be a U.S. Senator?
Well, I think that I have a couple of different layers of engagement that are useful. So one layer of engagement is being involved in counties all over the state for an extended period of time. So that means that I have been to many of these counties. So my campaigning as a US Senator is not for the most part, is not the first time I've been in that county. You know, I've been in those counties for a number of years, have contacts there, understand the needs of the community. I've had a chance through engagement with the Municipal Association of South Carolina and the South Carolina Association of Counties to talk with the layer of municipal leaders of those counties to hear, oh, what are their needs? How are they trying to address those needs? How could the federal government partner with them in making those needs, make sure those needs are addressed? So that deep engagement is important. Also having an advocacy background is important. So, you know, I didn't just wake up one morning and put two to two together and say, hey, you know, no, my dad raised us on that. My mom raised us on being civically engaged. So I have that orientation, and I've been involved in local, state, and national organizations in terms of attempting to address social needs and make social change. So that layer of advocacy is added to knowledge about municipal operations. Also having a collaborative orientation. So a lot of the work that I have done over the years has not just been work that I've done, it's work that I've done in partnership with other organizations, and often organizations that typically don't work together. So I try to DeSilo my efforts by the people that we bring together. So being able to work in partnership, build collaborations, have community working together on projects. And I've also learned in that process, writing grants and writing piece of legislation. So I've done that as well, studied policy and how it works, and have engaged in policy. And I've done that at the national and at the international level. You know, again, I think at this moment where we have what's happening in Russia and the Ukraine, how that impacts our livelihoods, our ability to get gas, our safety and our security. I've been engaged in those questions. So that's going to be an important element to anyone who is serving right now. And if you know, I think it's going to make me a much stronger, more effective senator having that background, because the role of the senator is a deliberative role. It's a thoughtful role. It's a role of, you know, more deep engagement than the House and the congressional side. And you know, that's the way it is at the state level as well as the local level. So I have a background in being deliberative, in being cooperative, in looking at policy and doing that in an international setting as well as a national and local setting. So I think that that's what you want to look at. You know, I think the public, I really encourage them to look at what the center does and to look at the individual backgrounds of the people who are applying for the job, because that's what it is. You know, it's not just, okay, this person has been in this role, and so their next natural step is this role and this role. You know, that's not what happened to the woman we know as AOC. You know, she came up from no political background at all other than an advocacy one. And she's one of the fiercest advocates, you know, and most effective legislators there. So I hope people don't get caught up in, okay, you have to have a certain kind of background or you have to have done this or that. I think we want to look at each, and that's for all of the elections that we have facing us this year. Look at what that person has. And the question you asked is a good one. How do your experiences inform what kind of senator you will be? And I think the diverse background that I have, the deep background in South Carolina, the work that I've done internationally, the collaborative work that I've done at the state, local, national level, and my anti-corruption work at the top level means I'm not afraid to challenge legislators, not afraid to challenge anybody actually, and not afraid to be questioned or to be asked to be transparent, not afraid of any of that at all. And so, you know, that's my background, and I think that it's the strongest background that will give us the best result in the U.S. Senate.
You know, you used a term, I never heard it before, but I instantly knew what it meant. You said DeSilo, and obviously it's the metaphor of each group or being in its own silo, like a missile silo.
Correct.
We've seen growing partisanship in Washington over the last decade, just getting worse and worse. That the US Senate was once famous for the cordial personal relationship between senators. Now lawmakers seem to see each other as enemies. How do we mend that? How can we de-silo the Senate, as it were?
Well, I think that people are going to have to ask about the results of any method of political engagement. If we have groups that aren't working together, aren't talking to each other, more bent on obstruction than anything else, what is the outcome of that? And ask that question from the point of view of where you live. You know, don't ask it in some high-flown place. Ask it, you know, at your own kitchen table. Look around in your own neighborhood. How is that helping or hurting our community when people are working in this way? And a good example of that is Tim Scott's vote no against and this was a no this week. There was a domestic terrorism act that was put forward by the House, passed the House, and it was stopped in the Senate. And Tim Scott's vote was one of those that stopped it. So this domestic terrorism bill was in response to what happened in Buffalo, to what happened in Texas. And it looked at not only gun violence, but hate crimes, engage the FBI and the other groups in working together to identify and kind of stop groups that have a white supremacy and Nazism background from carrying out these attacks. But that was stopped. Tim Scott said no to all of that. So the question there is, how is that helping us be more safe? Just kind of being in a silo that's going to say no to everything, just because it comes on from the other side of the aisle. So we're really, this is an opportunity for us to pay a lot of attention to that, because we're in a position to take action with our votes. And I always say the vote is mightier than the gun.
I
So
like
we need
that.
to remember that.
I like that phrase. Well, you've mentioned corruption. You've mentioned domestic terrorism. What are some of the other issues that would be your priorities as senator?
Well, I'm going to answer this question, and then I'm going to have to wrap, because I do have another radio event that I have to do in a couple of minutes. But my priorities are going to be, first, looking at making sure that we preserve our democracy, because it is under threat due to some of the changes that have been made in a variety of states, including our own, with election law, because there are some people after the 2020 election who wanted to produce a what's known as a big lie about how the election was tainted and all of this sort of thing, leading to the January 6th insurrection, and a lot of these election law changes that actually kind of flowed also from the gutting of the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court. So we need to have passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and other protections that make sure that our vote is protected and that we have the democratic process. That's going to be important. It's also going to be important for me to look at things like police reform, to make sure, and we've just come through the anniversary of the George Floyd killing. So we want to make sure that we have police officers who are going to do their work, but also to be accountable, so that we are reducing these officer-involved shootings, gun violence, and not just mass shootings. Although what we had this past week was egregious enough, but the rash of gun violence that we have, ranging from mass shootings like Texas and Buffalo and California and the Pulse, and right here in South Carolina with Mother Emanuel, also including domestic violence. South Carolina was #1 in domestic violence murders for a number of years, and we're probably still in the top 10. And our community gun violence, where our young people are being taken away from us far too early. So I'm looking at remedies for those that include looking at some changes to access to gun laws and background checks and things like that, but also greater investment in our communities, so that some of the things that lead to radicalization, the poverty, the isolation, some of the other things in our community can be addressed by investment. I'm going to support looking at climate, and that is one of the global issues that I'll look at. The Russian-Ukraine war, climate, our current pandemic and future pandemics. We want to look at that. We also are committed to make sure that women have a right to make their own decision and that Roe v. Wade is codified. That's important as well. And we also want to have a strong economy. We're having lots of issues now with the price of gas and, the prices of things at the grocery store. So that finding ways to continue to support families and businesses, those will be high priority. But make no mistake, this is not a typical election year. I really want your listeners to understand that, because we have the typical, we're interested in infrastructure and broadband and this, that, and the other. This is a year when so much about our country is being threatened. Our democratic practice, our ability for women to be, to make their own decisions, to the CRT replacement theory, this whole construct that, during Black History Month, our legislators were talking about critical race theory and trying to pass things that would not allow certain things to be taught in our schools. So these are the things that we have, this kind of othering climate that we're trying to form our government around. And that's not America. And it's not going to be America. But fortunately, the people in our communities of South Carolina have the chance to strike back. The Empire Strikes Back. I know you like movies, all right? The Empire Strikes Back. Well, we are the empire. And we get to strike back against these elements that are trying to stifle our voices, trying to keep us from really being able to have a say in our own communities, and trying to recast racism and white supremacy as something else. We get to strike back this year. And make no mistake, there's plenty of us who are just waiting for that opportunity and know that we can remind them of what powerful people we are. So it doesn't matter that we're a red state, doesn't matter that we're not one of the battleground states. We can be one of the ones that come out in force, flip this state, add more Democratic senators so that we have a strong senator of Democrats majority, a strong Democratic Senate majority, which means that we can pass the things that come from the House, that come from Congressman Clyburn's side, so it doesn't get stopped at the Senate border. So that's the other border war we got to do between the House and the Senate. So we're going to be there to keep that stuff passing so that we have the America that we envision, that our grandparents envision, that our parents envision. We have the time to do it now. And I believe that we will.
Well, this has just been an awesome discussion. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I can't express enough how welcoming people have been around the state to my campaign. And I believe if people come out, we will be victorious. So again, I do have to leave you, but I thank you again, Mr. Forsyth, for the invitation. My name is Catherine Fleming Bruce. I'm running for United States Senate, and people can start voting on Tuesday, May 31st at their local election office. They'll vote there through June 10th. And then election day is June 14th. So make sure you're part of it from whatever corner of Greenville you live in. Make sure you're there. Let those people know you're part of the empire and you'll come to take it back.
Well, thank you again. You've been listening to our discussion with Catherine Fleming Bruce, candidate for the United States Senate here in the state of South Carolina. This is Michael Forsyth on WQAT, the radio station of Allen Temple A.M.E, the downtown church in Greenville, South Carolina. Thanks again. And we'll give after the show, after your interview,